chapter 7, and one thing stood out to me about Yahusha. I pay attention to the way that he talked and the way that he taught. And one thing I noticed is how he used his discernment. You know, if you pay attention to the way that he conducted himself, you'll learn a lot. And it'll help you learn how to conduct yourself as a follower of him also. In John chapter 7, what we have going on here is Yahusha's brothers are challenging him. They don't believe that he is who he say he is, right? They were going up to the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles, and they basically challenged him and said, if you are who you say you are, then why don't you, do these things openly, right? Why don't you do these things in public? Because most of the signs that Yahusha did, they were, he tried to keep it down low. He tried to do things in private, right? Because he didn't want to be glorified like that, he wanted all the glory to go to the Father. So they're basically telling him, why don't you do these things openly? They're saying that out of disbelief, right? But they continued to question him. And in John chapter 7 verses 14, it says, now about the middle of the feast, Yahusha went up to the temple and taught. And the Jews marveled, saying, how does this man know letters, having never studied? Yahusha responded to them and said, now pay attention to this response. My doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone's will is to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God or whether I speak on my own authority. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. So they're challenging him, and they don't believe in him. And what he said is, my doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. So he's saying what he's teaching is not his teaching. It's God's teaching. They're not challenging him, they're challenging God. That's what he's telling them. And then he follows up in verse 17 and says, if anyone's will is to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine. He shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God or whether I speak on my own authority. So that's very important right there. He said, if your will is to do God's will, then you will know if someone is speaking on their own authority or on God's behalf, right? So if someone is speaking and they're teaching the word of God or they're leading people, if you are in the will of God, if you're following Yahusha and you're in line with his will, then he will give you the proper discernment to be able to tell whether that person is from God or not, right? But that's if you're in God's will. If you're outside of God's will, you won't be able to see that. And that's what he was telling these Pharisees who didn't believe in him. He said, if your will was to do God's will, you would be able to tell that I'm from Yahuwah. But they wasn't in God's will. That's why they were blinded. That's why they couldn't tell that he was the Messiah. So the point of this video is to let you all know the proper way to recognize a false teacher or a false prophet is, for one, you have to be in the will of God. Because if you're not going to be able to tell. Just like Yahusha just told the Pharisees, if you are in the will of God, you will know whether a teaching is from him or not. Be blessed.